Hey, Joey Star here for Star Quality Kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make Brazilian white rice based on how my mother would make it when I was growing up. Mom's rice was based on traditional Brazilian white rice, but of course a little bit tweaked according to her taste and dietary concerns. Just like the cuisine that it comes from, this was a staple in our meals. You will find rice as the foundation for many Brazilian dishes, much like other cultures, because of how well it pairs with everything. This is because it is filling, versatile, highly accessible, affordable, and it kind of takes on the flavors of whatever that it's paired with. One of the main differences of Brazilian rice compared to what you're probably used to basically is in the way that we make it, including the steps that we take prior to adding the water and the way that we season it. And because of that, it has such a good flavor that it even tastes great on its own. For example, the very last time that I made it, I was also testing out another recipe, and that recipe was taking a lot longer than I was expecting it to, and I was getting hungry. And so what happened was I was just kind of picking at the rice a little bit. Like I had made 4 servings like I'm going to do today, and next thing you know, I was down to like 1 freaking serving had left in the pan because I just couldn't stop eating it. That's how tasty it was. That's right, the Brazilian style rice is so tasty that you actually wouldn't mind having it every day. And if you grew up in Brazil or in other Mediterranean countries like Portugal and Spain, there's a pretty good chance you're eating rice every day anyway. So at least in the case of the Brazilian rice, it's a pleasure to do so. So here's what we're going to need. 1/8 of a cup of vegetable oil, or 2 tablespoons. You're going to need a cup of white rice, preferably long grain white rice, or in my case, I'm using extra long grain white rice because that's what Mom preferred to use. 2 cups of water, half a tablespoon of tempero pronto. If you need to check out my video on how to make tempero pronto, link in the description box below. You can make it a different way. If you're not going to use the tempero pronto, then your ratio of vegetable oil is actually going to go up to a 1/4 cup, and you're going to have to figure out the ratio with the garlic and onion and whatever else. I'm not really going to get into that. I'm not really interested in making this the way Mom would, so this is essential. So if you don't have any of this made, go ahead and make it after you've watched this video, of course. Go watch that video, make it, then come back and watch this video again. How much salt you use is going to depend on how salty your tempero pronto is. So this is why I always tell you about figuring out how much of each ingredient you use when you prepare this stuff, because you want to give yourself a consistency so that when it's time to make a dish like this and you're using tempero pronto, you know how salty this is going to be. You know how this is going to affect the flavor of whatever you're making with it. So the amount of salt you use is going to depend on how salty your tempero pronto is. Just like how much oil is in your tempero pronto is going to determine how much oil you're going to use in a recipe like this. Based on my tempero, which I've learned to make consistently, I figured out, my oil portion and my salt portion. So in this case, if you made it exactly like me, half a teaspoon will do the trick nicely. Okay, so very first thing, what we like to do is we like to wash our rice. That's right, kind of rinse it. Being that I come from the background that I do, I happen to have a special rice strainer, what we use for washing rice. Not a big deal if you don't have one of these. I'll see if I can find one of these on Amazon and drop a link. You might be able to find one maybe at a bodega, or if you're lucky enough to have an authentic Brazilian grocery store, you might be able to find one of these, which would be great. If not, Amazon, or if you can't wait, any strainer where the holes are small enough that you can strain the rice will work. So I'm gonna take my rice, drop it in this guy here, whoop, and I'm gonna bring it to the sink and rinse it off. You basically just run water over your rice, and I actually like to use the sprayer, but because I'm holding the camera right now, I can't hold the sprayer. I just want to give you a quick note. What you want to do is you want to pay attention to water. Like right now, I don't know how well this will show up on camera, but you can see that the water is actually pretty starchy. Right? You can see how cloudy and murky it is. And more importantly, if you're looking underneath, you should be able to see as you're straining the starch in the water. So what you want to do is you want to rinse this until the water that's coming out of there runs clear. And it should take about, I'd say about 2-3 minutes tops. The rice has been rinsed. I got to put to the side for now. Next thing you want to do is you want to take your 2 cups of water and set it to boil. That's right. You're going to boil it separately in a kettle or in a pan. Something really important about your water to rice ratio. This is true in most rice recipes. If you're using white rice, you want your water to be double of what you're making of rice. I'm using 1 cup of the dried rice, therefore I'm going to use 2 cups of the water. What I like to do is when I measure it out, I actually put just a touch more water, just a little bit above the line on the 2 cups. And the reason why is because you're going to boil the water, so obviously some of it's going to change the steam. Therefore, you're actually going to lower the amount of water that's in there. So I like to put just a hair more, just to make sure that when I'm ready to use the water, that I'm actually using 2 cups. This is an important rule because if you do this part correctly, then you're only going to have to add water 1 time. Most likely. Don't hold me to it. I don't want any lawsuits. I just read that article a few weeks ago about the woman who sued Kraft about the mac and cheese. That is some funny. I don't want anyone suing me for that. I don't have any money to give you anyway. Certainly not 5 million, right? If your ratio of rice to water is 1 cup rice to 2 cups water, and you get it exactly, there's a pretty good chance you're only going to need to add that amount. While that is heating up to a boil, we're going to start cooking the rice. Yes, we're going to start cooking the rice ahead of the water. What we want to do is we'll take about a medium-sized pan, and I'm going to set it for a medium-high heat. Once the pan starts to get warm, like I just rinsed it before I started filming, so there's still droplets of water in there. So you can actually tell by the water when the pan's starting to heat up, because the water will start to move. And when that happens, I will add my oil. All right, so my pan is warmer now. I'm going to add my 2 tablespoons of oil. I'll allow that to heat up for about a minute. As soon as you start to hear the slightest hint of a sizzle, that means the oil is warm. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my tempero in there, dump her in there. Now there's 2 moments in this process where you really have to pay attention. The first one is this. Basically, I'm gonna start to stir fry my tempero. And I know it sounds weird because it's basically in liquid form, but you kind of want to just spread it and stir it a little bit, paying attention to the sizzle sound in there, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to burn your tempero. Remember, if you make tempero based on my recipe, it means there's some onion in there, so you run a little bit of risk of it burning and changing to brown. Once you have a decent sizzle in there, that's where we're going to toss our rice in that bad boy. So it should only be about a minute or so that you're in stir-fry mode with your tempero. Let's add the rice. I'm just going to drop her in there. Get it all in there. I'm going to use my cooking spoon and just kind of scrape up every bit that I can from this rice strainer. Get it all in there. Once it's all in there, you want to give a slight stir and kind of spread your rice around. Spread it around the bottom of the pan so it's kind of evenly distributed. And what you want to do is for about the next minute or so, 2 minutes or so, you want to give it a little stir every 20 to 30 seconds, I would say. Or whatever feels right. You're going to know because as you're stirring it, you're going to feel the rice kind of change a bit. You're going to notice how as they heat up, they're going to start to clump together and harden just slightly. Or I should say they're going to become more firm, which is good. That's what you want. Quick note about the tempero that I didn't mention before, but I was talking about the ratio with the salt. The reason why I said to alter the amount of salt you have based on the taste of your tempero is because if you're going to add more tempero than I did, you're probably going to tint your rice to a greenish color, and that's not what we're looking for. The amount of tempero that I put in here is just enough so that you get that nice fragrance in your rice, but the rice is still white. So I'm going to go ahead and stir this a little bit more. All right, it's probably going to take about another minute or two, so. All right, so it's been about a minute or so. I'm stirring up this rice now. Now that it's closer to being done, I'm actually stirring it a little more often. And as I'm stirring it, I feel the rice giving a little more resistance as it starts to clump together. And not sure how well this shows up on film, but there will be a slight greenish tint from the tempero, but that's actually going to dissipate when we add our water later, so don't worry about that. But yeah, it's starting to clump. The clumps are starting to feel a little harder. And this is another point, similar to when we stir fried the tempero, you want to make sure do not burn your rice. If your rice starts to burn, the flavor is going to show up right in your rice and the whole thing is going to taste like it's burnt, even if you only burn a little bit. So please be careful and pay attention to the grains, particularly the ones that are near the bottom. If they're just starting to turn brown, then you're already cooking it too long. Move to the next step immediately. So I'm just about there, actually. It's gonna be about another few seconds because you can kind of see here, see how it's getting real clumpy? Look, see? If I drop it here, you can see it's kind of like these little chunks, right? They kind of got together in a clique. Kind of like when you're in high school, all the jocks sat together, the computer nerds sat together, the kids whose families had money, they all sat together. They kind of form these little cliques. Well, your rice is doing the same thing right now. So when it does that, when you see that there's some distinct cliques like there is right now, This is where we're going to add our water, which I had boiling off screen. Just going to go ahead and just take, is that exactly, just put it all in there. Get all that in there, and this is where I add your salt. Just toss that in there, give it a decent stirring, all right? Give it a nice little spread going here, okay? It's almost gonna look like a rice soup. All right, until they invent smell-o-vision, I guess you don't know what's going on here unless I tell you, but I'm actually already getting a nice fragrance from the tempero being fused in with the rice, and it's actually making me salivate, which is crazy because I'm not even hungry. Like, I had a full meal, like not 1 hour before I started preparing for this shoot. So there's no reason for me to be hungry, but that's how good this stuff smells, is that it's making me salivate regardless. Once you've done that, you'll want to set your stove for the lowest possible setting. In my case, it's the LO. If you have a gas range, you want to bring that flame down to where you can just, there's barely any flame there, okay? And then you want to put a top on this bad boy. Very important to cover it. So at this point, set it to low, put a cover, set your timer for 20 minutes. So 20 minutes from now, we're gonna see what the rice looks like, and you're gonna know when it's done because, just going in closer, see if you can hear this. You hear that boiling? When the rice is done, you won't hear that boil anymore. And then the top of the rice, which it's not gonna look like that now, so I'm not gonna bother showing you until it's ready, but it'll have holes in the top where basically where the bubbles were pushing through at the top there. I'll show you what that looks like in about 20 minutes, but really important, once you get to this stage, leave the rice alone. All right, don't mess with it. Portuguese will say, pode mexer, okay? Mexa no, don't mess with it. Leave it undisturbed. And we'll come back when the 20 minutes is up and we're ready for the next step. Time's up and should reveal something like this. So you can see there's no more boiling going on. I'll be quiet for a second so you can listen. See, no boiling, no sizzling, or nothing. And you can see the little holes. I'll kind of zoom in a little bit here. You see the little holes in the top where the last of the water kind of poked through. That's your indicator that this is ready. Look at, oh, by the way, look at how fluffy it is, and you can see individual grains. That's mainly due to the fact that we rinsed the starch out of the rice, so they're not really clumping together. They're kind of nice and fluffy. So now, we're not quite done yet though. What we want to do is remove it from the heat. Just take it right off. Put it somewhere where it's not hot. And what you want to do is actually, now if you have a lid like I do, I have one of these semi-fancy lids where you can turn this and it just kind of cracks it open a little bit. But if you don't have that, if you're not living the baller life like I am, haha, then you just kind of crack it open a little bit like that and leave it that way for about 5 minutes. And then this rice will be done. So rice is all done. I cooked up some other things so we can test out the rice. Let's get a gander here, shall we? Got my rice on the plate here. Nice little glisten, nice and fluffy. Not really clumpy at all. It just kind of all flows whatever way I get it going here. And I added some ground beast, sometimes known as carne moída in Portuguese. I have cooked some fresh beets, which I don't remember what that's called in Portuguese, but whatever it is, it's pretty good stuff. Let's go ahead and try out the rice. I'll take some on here. Nice aromatic scent to it. You get some of the fragrance from the tempero, including the garlic. Just enough for the onion that's there. And let's take a bite. This is the rice just by itself. I'm gonna take a little bit more. As previously stated, Brazilian style rice, because it's fried ahead of time with seasoning. The seasoning is ingrained in the rice that by the time you're done cooking it and it's fluffed up, it retains that flavor, it retains that fragrance. So you can eat a whole plate of that rice by yourself. The good news is, because we rinsed out the starch, it's nice and fluffy. It would be healthier for you, except that we added in the oil and other stuff. This goes so with other things. All right, I'm gonna try some of it with a little bit of this ground beef I made. I fried it with some tempero pronto, of course, because that just goes good on everything, and a bit of onion. That's it, real simple recipe. Just gonna try that together in this. If there's one simple thing that goes great with Brazilian style rice, it's carne moída, which is why you find it a lot in Brazil. Very affordable to make, very easy to make, very tasty. Oh, so help me. I'm not saying that this came out as good as my mother would have made it. I don't think it's possible. The best I can hope for is to get so good at this that it's as good as mom's. It's still not going to be like hers because she had her own artistic way to cook. Her food had a very distinct taste to it. When you ate her food, you knew that was her food. You knew that she was the one that made it. She just had that touch with it. It can't be replicated. But what I can do is follow recipes in her style, and while it may not be the same, it'll still be pretty good. And at the very least, it gives me a little bit of a taste of home. It gives me a little bit of a throwback. I'm gonna try a little bit of the beef by itself because I'm curious. Okay. Just kind of a baseline. And then I'm gonna try some with the rice here. This kind of rice goes great with everything. Ground beef, steaks, chicken, very well chicken, pork, beans, any kind of savory dish, especially a saucy savory dish, is gonna go very good with this rice. Make yourself a batch of chili. This rice is amazing with chili, I'm telling you. One of the key things about being born and raised in the United States is that mom would make rice like this, and then I would make something else. Particularly as a teenager, I started learning how to cook. I would make something very Americanized, like 2 to 3 alarm chili, but I would use her rice to go with it. Oh my God, what a combination, I'm telling you. If you try to make this and it doesn't quite come out right the first time, don't get too frustrated. It takes a little bit of practice, but for the most part, if you follow the instructions the way I showed you and the way that it's spelled out, I'm gonna put the recipe in the description box below. Eventually, after a few tries, you should find yourself getting closer and closer to really good rice. And what's going to happen is each time you make it, you're going to realize what you did. You're going to say, oh, you know what? I had a little too much water that time. It came out too mushy. Or I didn't have enough water that time. It was a little too firm. Or my tempero was a little too salty and I added too much salt to it. Whatever it is, you're going to figure it out. But once you get good at making this, you're going to want to have rice every day. And let me tell you, when I grew up, we had rice almost every day. This rice tastes so good. It was our pleasure to have that rice every day. Yeah, I can't stop eating this. Part of it's that I'm hungry. My appetite did come back while I was waiting for the rice to cook. Muito gostoso. I haven't even touched my water yet. This dish and I, we need some alone time. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this recipe. I hope you're enjoying the recipes I'm giving you. I got some more to show you this season, and I'm preparing more recipes to be filmed for next season. So thanks for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and stalk. We'll check you later. Oh yeah.